I really enjoy Star Trek V, but I'm also not blind, okay? I can see the issues with the film. I think this film is a great example to all those people out there that think, I can direct a movie. Maybe you can. Maybe you need a little bit more experience. The story of Star Trek V is fascinating. It is a tale of some issues, a lot of hope, and a bit of hubris. You heard me right. Some sheer hubris. Because some decisions went on when making this film. One of the sources that we used for this video in particular is William Shatner's Movie Memories book. And if you haven't had a chance to read that, I really recommend it, because no one's ever going to accuse The Final Frontier of being a dull film, both what we got and what they set out to make. Funnily enough, okay, because I believe in transparency, this is not the first time I've recorded this intro, because much like The Final Frontier, little issues came in when filming these ups and downs. For example, you might notice that the up counter and the down counter are on different sides from normal. Well, that's because I think I had a little voice of God in my head saying, no, point that way. Point that way. So mea culpa, we're going to have a little bit of fun by going up and down, as opposed to the other way around this week. One of the things that I get on really well with this film is that I grew up with this film. It was released in October of 1989. I was 1. Okay, so I have fierce nostalgia glasses on me when I watch Star Trek V, because I have vivid memories of being in my nanny's house, and we would watch this film a lot because this is apparently the one that RTE had the rights to. And also we would go down to Extravision and we'd rent the video again and again and again, bearing in mind the other films were there as well. We liked Final Frontier because it's definitely a film that's safe for kids. I mean, I was this big watching this movie, and it's one of the ones I have fond memories from. There are those that will have seen this film in the theater, depending on where you were in the world. Yep. And then there are those that will have seen it when it came to video, when it came to DVD, when it came to Blu-ray, and there might even be those who are watching it for the first time in 2025. And honestly, if this is your first watch of The Final Frontier, either in advance of this ups and downs, or if, life has got in the way, I really want to know, what did you feel watching it now, with everything, all of existing Trek before you at this point? And if this was the first time you watched it, let us know in the comments below. But okay, let's jump in to all of the ups and downs for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. The first up of this film, without a doubt, Lawrence Luckinbill. Of any issues that Star Trek V has, the casting of Sybok is not one of them. Shatner has spoken about how he was channel hopping one night, saw Luckinbill playing LBJ in a play about L.B. Johnson, and he went, yep, that's our guy. And he said one of the only easy things about this film was finding our Sybok. And he is one of the elements of this film that just works perfectly. That intro of him, galloping toward the screen on a unicorn. Okay, I know it's not technically a unicorn, but you've got that little horn on the head, and they wanted a more traditional unicorn, but then they were told you're not doing a unicorn, but also it ties into the whole fantasy and mythology of everything. I'm calling it a unicorn. He runs up to this moisture farmer, and I want to give an up as well to the location, because I know, having, now done a little bit of study of behind the scenes, what an absolute nightmare it was filming on location for this film. And for it to look as halfway decent as it does is an achievement. And also in this up as well, I want to shout out this character, John, so it's J''ONN. I don't think his name is ever said on screen, but he commits so much to this. There's a scene where, right here, where Sybok walks up, he's there holding a gun. He says, I can't believe you would kill me over empty holes in the desert. And he just says, it's all I have. And it just feels so real. And you can see that this is the type of person that Sybok wants to recruit. It's the person who has nothing and wants something more. For example, he's not looking for the Fleet Admiral to join his quest, or at least not at this point, because the most content person in the world wouldn't have any interest in following Sybok. Whereas this man needs someone to believe in him and to follow. It's quite a scene to open this film with. When setting out to do these ups and downs, I didn't have this in mind as a plan, but it's worked out that one of the earliest ups in each film has been taken up to the music. Jerry Goldsmith returns to the Star Trek franchise here, which is another excellent decision on Shatner's part, by the way, I have to say. So first time since the motion picture, and it's here where he, melds his own Star Trek march from the motion picture with Alexander Courage's theme from the original series to get the now traditional dun 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 dun. I'm gonna stop there because of both copyright, and you don't need to hear me butchering that music anymore. And this becomes, it becomes the ending of First Contact, Insurrection, Nemesis anyway. It's a very familiar progression in this depiction, if you like. I remember also, I know I've talked about watching the films out of order before, but I remember being so familiar with the Next Generation theme that when I watched the motion picture, I was like, hang on, it's missing a bit. And they're going, oh, actually, it's in 5. So yeah, it's in Star Trek 5 that we get that powerful statement of Alexander Courage's theme matched with Jerry Goldsmith's. This big march softens down into a very, very chill music as we play over scenes of Captain Kirk climbing a mountain. Why is Captain Kirk climbing the mountain? If you've seen the video, you know what I'm talking about. Now, speaking of this mountain, it is, El Capitan is a very impressive looking vista in Yosemite. And again, serious props to the location shooting. The funny thing here is how not faked some of the footage is here. So there was a large fiberglass section of El Capitan that was made for this film for William Shatner to hang off, basically. And it was actually transported to Yosemite. So, we have scenes where he's hanging off the side of this, fiberglass rock where you can see the real mountain in the background. There's enough marrying of real and movie magic here. Because, what do you think? What's that line from Californication? It's made in a Hollywood basement. And you start to think how much of it is on location, how much isn't. There was also a scene, which sadly didn't make it into the film, where Shatner really did hang off the side of a mountain for a little while. And apparently producer Harv Bennett was, his lunch was also going off the side of this cliff as well. And this was on advice of, you should learn how to climb rocks better, see if we can get this footage in. None of the footage made it into the film because it was grainy or clouds got in the way, so it didn't look like it was that high up. But there was one point where there was a tree in the shot that made it look like he was only standing 6 inches off the ground. The things we do for art. Now, as much as I love the gravity boots, because they're silly and I still like them, my first down, yes, look over here, for the film is for Kirk's fall. I don't mean the bit at the end where Kirk is saved by Spock, who grabs his ankle, he doesn't hit the boulder. That I like. They did that by flipping the camera on its side, or flipping the set on its side, and it all actually looks fine. No, it's that bit where Kirk is superimposed against the passing background. And welcome to Star Trek V's visual effects, folks. I'm going to talk a lot about the visual effects of this film because you can't not talk about the visual effects of this film when reviewing Star Trek V. Very quickly, you probably know the story by now, so please indulge me if you don't know it. When time came to make Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, Industrial Light and Magic, which had worked so effectively on the previous Star Trek films, and of course on Encounter at Farpoint in The Next Generation, which was in its second season at this point, was busy. They were doing Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Their main team, they described as the A team, and the B team were doing Ghostbusters 2. So there was no one in Industrial Light and Magic to work on Star Trek V. Ralph Winter, who was one of the producers of this film, who is also a blessedly open man when it comes to talking about these things, he said that, tying back into our hubris talk, when making Star Trek V, they were, quote, smoking their own reviews of the very well received Star Trek IV. They put out a call for effects houses to effectively pitch them to do the film. They would then front 10 grand to each of these people to then make an effects sequence. Now, 10 grand might sound like a lot to you and me, but individually, 10 grand, maybe, not that much in a multi-million-dollar film. It's enough when there's several of them going out. Bran Ferren, who was based out of Hoboken, New Jersey, effectively won his pitch by wowing Shatner with what he could do practically in his garage, as Shatner describes it. And even though he had a resume, he had done things, well, we'll see how the film goes as we go on, won't we? Kirk's very realistic, looking almost death, does, however, give us an up for a very pissed off Dr. McCoy. DeForest Kelley is brilliant in this film, and he gets a lot to do. There's also a greater sense of naturalism in his performance. He's possibly even more southern than usual. I've watched a lot of Golden Girls recently, so I'm just thinking of Rue McClanahan's Blanche in my head. Anyway, not related, but there it is. And I really like how he plays McCoy in this film. And you get a lot of basically you get some of the best McCoy ever in this film. Because when you think about the movies, he was great in the motion picture, Disco McCoy. He was still good, don't get me wrong, but fairly standard in The Wrath of Khan. Whereas in 3, DeForest Kelley is effectively playing Spock for half the film. So, this is where it feels like he gets to let loose a little bit more. And I really enjoy it. I will, of course, discuss the campfire scenes now in a moment, but before that, I would like to take a trip with you to Nimbus 3. On the planet of galactic peace, again, this was a struggle. Particularly the exterior shots were a struggle to film. But my first up of the whole thing, David Warner joins Star Trek here in Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Of course, as we know, he will come back in Star Trek VI and then again in The Next Generation. But here as St. John Talbot, he is actually, this is his first appearance, and he plays the sort of washed up, over it English diplomat, or British, I don't know for a fact that he was playing an Englishman, sorry. It just really, he's over it. He's done. And I love him. I love David Warner in pretty much everything I've seen him in. So that was definitely an up from me. The bar is good fun. I do want to give absolute props and up to Linda Fetters Howard, who plays the cat dancer. She's not specifically referred to as a Kzinti on screen. Apocryphally, or kind of like pinch of salt, apparently on set she was being referred to as a Kzinret, which is fine. According to the actress herself, she didn't hear that. So it's one of those kind of like, if you wanted to be canon, you can. If not, that's fine as well. But you know me, I hear anything Kzinti, it's a straight away and up. She suffered for this role. She was a stunt woman, or she's still with us, is a stunt woman herself. And so the physicality, that was fine. But sitting in the makeup chair took a long time. Somewhere between 6 and 8 hours to apply the makeup, and I think something around 2 hours to remove it all. Her call time started at 2 a.m. in the morning. And when you think about it, she's got quite a prominent role, but if you're adding it up in terms of seconds, she's not in it for very long. I did have a wonder, right, because one of the things that stands out about the fact she's got 3 breasts. So I thought, hang on, was somebody watching Total Recall? Was this, did somebody borrow it from Lissy and Naff? Well, no, Total Recall came out after this film. Did Lissy and Naff's character borrow that from the Kzineret? Oh, Hollywood, you fickle mistress. There's a funny story about the makeup artist who was tasked with creating the chest piece for her, that he joked and said, he would describe his day, and his wife would start to get a bit like, hang on, you're spending a whole day working on another woman's chest. How am I supposed to feel about this? And so basically, she came with him one day, and he described it as, once you see, it was like working under the hood of a car. Everything starts to get a lot less sexy. And I thought, my God, what a perfect description for actually working on a film set. There is a certain glamour that is assigned to working in the movies that really isn't there. People are there to do a job. And I just thought it was a funny little anecdote. And again, you know, as we go through both the movie and Shatner's book, there's a lot of like, oh, the magic of films is in fact how much pain can we endure in this filming schedule. I do have a down, and the down is for Caitlin Darr. The Romulan representative. I will be honest, this is a wooden performance. I don't want to be cruel at the same time. Perhaps, you know, when you're in a scene with David Warner, you're probably going to come off the weaker of the two. But every single time I watch the movie, hello, I am the Romulan representative. We are here to deliver exposition. Huzzah. And speaking of exposition, take it down for, this is the bit where we find out why they're here. Oh, you're actually just reading from the liner notes. Right, okay. That's not the performer's fault. But, you know, it's just like, oh, this is a clunky scene of exposition here to set up what's going on, why they're here. Cutting then to the outside where you have Sybok's followers, both of them, running up to the city and kind of learning a little bit about what happened here is interesting as well, because this scene was crippled by budget cuts. So originally you're supposed to have a sizable crowd of followers, you know, storming Paradise City and, you know, frightening the locals. This was supposed to be an oppressive scene. What we get, the reason it looks as half decent as it is because of camera trickery. This is effectively the same group of, now I'm paraphrasing the number, I'm going to say 12 followers, right? Please don't take that as fact. But, you know, a small group of followers filmed from that angle, that angle, that angle, that angle, that angle, and running through the gate loads and loads of times. That's grand. With camera editing, you can do that. You can make it look like a bigger crowd. It's those kind of wider shots where you're like, Sybok's not that convincing then, is he? One thing I guess I do like is that everything's pretty scary. R3 ambassadors come out into the bar and General Cord gets a drink. Take it up, Charles Cooper. Also, canonically in my head, he's Kempek's dad. There you are now. That's my headcanon. I know I mentioned budget cuts, but look, down, reusing the footage from the end of the voyage home to be the first shot of the Enterprise A in this film. Ironically, it's one of the best looking shots of the ship because it was done by ILM, but I mean, we had just seen it. There is another infamous piece of footage being reused that I will discuss when it comes to The Undiscovered Country and Generations. Oh, you know which one I mean. So this one isn't as egregious as that, but when you go from the end of one film to the start of another and you're just reusing the shot, it's really obvious. I will, however, go straight into an up for both James Doohan and Nichelle Nichols, because I love what they did with them in this film. Shatner got a lot of pushback from Gene Roddenberry, allegedly, about the use of the supporting cast in this film and the comedic tones that they took. One of the studio mandates was Voyage Home did really, really well, make Final Frontier funny. And they did do that, and sure, some bits work better than others. I actually quite like the lighter tone between the supporting cast. I don't feel there was really any need for romantic overtures between Uhura and Scotty. They hadn't really been there before. I'm certainly not against it, don't get me wrong. I think maybe, certainly a friendship was always there, so I quite like the bringing Scotty rations, you know, sitting down, chatting, you know, shooting the breeze, all that, totally fine with. In my little headcanon, when it becomes a little bit more overtly romantic, I might put it down to Sybok's influence, you know, not really quite sure why that was needed, but in that respect, I'm nitpicking there. I will be the first one to say that. And I really like Chekhov and Sulu, for example. I think they come across well. You know, I know there was pushback to, oh my God, I can't believe that the Navigator got lost. I thought it was silly. I thought it was fun. And also, I love that, you know, we're stuck in a blizzard. And we can't see a thing. Look, Sulu, the sun. It's a miracle. I love it. Like that whole scene is an up from me because they've always been mates. And I think it comes across so well. So to me, I don't have an issue with the comedic tone, certainly not in those scenes. There is a red alert, the Enterprise is needed, which I'll come back to. We just did a video about overused plot tropes, but I'll come back to that. But then we get properly the campfire scene taken up. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, for its faults, has the best scenes of the big three in the entire franchise, and I will stand over that statement. The campfire, the scene in the observation lounge, the campfire at the end, a lot of their interactions. This was achieved by three actors who knew each other well, and they knew how to work with each other. This version of Spock now, we've settled back into the more relaxed Spock, certainly where he was, I guess, headed before Wrath of Khan, and that, took a good bit of the voyage home to get there. And this is a perfect balance. So I've said this many times before, the campfire scenes are the best of the franchise. My latinum up of the film goes to the campfire scenes. It's got it all. You've got McCoy ringing the bell. You have got Spock preparing to toast a marshmallow. With the marshmallow dispenser that I still want. I've seen people with them. Kraft & Co. I'm right here. Do you want to do a sponsorship? Yeah, come here. And we get the infamous discussion. It starts with McCoy going, Jim, you really piss me off. Human life is far too precious a thing. And, Kirk going, well, I knew I wouldn't die. I've always known I'll die alone. That's not going to age well. See you in generations. The three of them together just so works for me. And then trying to sing Row, Row, Row Your Boat. Shatner said that apparently, as fun as that scene is, poor old D. Kelly was completely tone deaf and completely arrhythmic. So he said half the fun was just trying to get him to come in on the third beat and to try and get him to sing this thing along with the others, to have access to that footage. Also, the three of them say goodnight to each other. Very, very Waltons. Think it was deliberate, and knowing that, me and my folks and my family have done that for years as well. I wonder, have we been inspired to that by Star Trek or the Waltons? Interesting. And now we get to the Klingons. Okay, bear with me. I am starting with a down, right? Kla and Vixus, they're not so much characters, really, are they? As we desperately need some sort of villain in this film to get us through to those last 10 minutes. So they're real paper tigers, and they're certainly not helped by, they look great. The makeup, not an issue. The shots of the bird of prey are not great, and their introduction of I'm shooting space garbage is not great. Like, really? Okay, cool. What is your affiliation to the Klingon Empire? Does anyone just have a ship? It's sort of a little inconsistent in Star Trek, isn't it? Like, do you just have your own bird of prey? Fair play if you do, as these punk Klingons, I don't really like them very much. On the flip side, and up to Todd Bryant and Spice Williams, who, although I don't like the Klingons at all, they sell it for the backseats. This is not a word against the performance. Todd Bryant is there, he's trying desperately to get through those Klingon teeth, and I think it's working. And she is just like, she commands every scene that she's in. They are brilliant. Just I wish they'd been written better. But I mean, like, when that bird of prey is shooting down that, it's not a complete reuse of the V'ger probe, but it's obviously designed to evoke it. I mean, down, that looks naff. Yeah, that looks naff. What I will say about it is, it's certainly not the worst effect of the film. That's coming. But it's not a good sign. There is a channel on YouTube, actually, if you get a chance, BL Creative. Check out that channel, because they're basically remaking some scenes from this film Target Practice being one of them. It is obviously updated because it's computer generated effects, but they're still trying to match the style that would have been available in, they're making the film 88, so back at that time. It's really good. So BL Creative, if you get a chance, do check out their channel. Down at the campsite, someone forgot to bring his communicator. Just the way Nichelle Nichols says, you forgot to bring it. Taken up. Because of course the crew has to go back to the Enterprise, which is parked in orbit. Look, I'm not gonna down seeing the Enterprise A. I am so on the record of saying that the refit Constitution is my favorite ship in all of Star Trek. But actually, I kind of like the A even more than I like the one from the motion picture. Although the motion picture does have the new Enterprise scene. Yeah, much of a muchness. So I'm not going to down it. Won't say it's the best looking scene in the world. What I will, however, give an up to is the updated Galileo shuttle. I really like the design of this shuttle. Actually, one second. I just wanted to show off a gift that I have absolutely treasured. This was made by a model maker, Andrew Carson, for me. Now, if you look carefully, you will see the registry number, the name on that shuttle as well, the ship that it's from. Isn't that pretty? Isn't that pretty? Sorry, I've always loved this. And yeah, I really love this configuration of shuttle. Absolutely, that's an up from me. And as our three favorites, if you like, they disembark the shuttle. We get that funny exchange between Spock and McCoy, correcting each other on which author. I am well versed in the classics, Doctor. And how come you don't know row, row, row your boat? But I love Scotty in this scene particularly. How many times do I have to tell you the right tool for the right job? Up. Because also the amount of times I've had my dad shout that at me, and yeah, now I know where he got it from. Again, all this kind of thing. Love this. Love this, by the way. You probably clocked it earlier on, but yeah, go climb a rock. Love this. Love the jacket, which we'll see when we get to the bridge. I do like, for as much as I can complain about the effects, and I will, of this film, I do like the look of it. Herman Zimmerman, who of course had done so much work in The Next Generation already, and worked in Star Trek, did a fantastic job on this film. He joked later on that because of how the film was received, he was like, oh, I'm never going to work again. No. He did a blinder on this job in both the sets. If you look at the corridors are just the corridors from the Enterprise D. But it kind of works. As we arrive on the bridge, we love a bit of nepotism here at TrekCulture, so take an up for a cameo by Melanie Shatner, who plays the Captain's yeoman. And then also, we take an up for the very first scene that was filmed for this movie, and it's the cameo by executive producer Harve Bennett. These days, 2025, I think it's sad to say that I think a lot of people might not know who Harve Bennett was. I would argue Harve Bennett was as monumental a figure in saving Star Trek, or at least establishing Star Trek in the 80s, as Nicholas Meyer was, as Leonard Nimoy was. Harve Bennett was the executive producer on The Wrath of Khan. He wrote The Search for Spock, and he was also executive producer on The Voyage Home, and he was almost not coming back for this film. He was sort of a superstar for Star Trek for those three films. However, toward the end of production on The Voyage Home, relations had begun to break down a little bit between Harve Bennett and particularly Leonard Nimoy, funnily enough, and there was a lot of butting heads. Bennett sort of described it as he felt he got this reputation as a bit of a no-man. He's executive producer. One of his jobs is get the money and save the money, which is a thankless job anywhere. And this led to a sort of a souring of the relationship. So when Shatner was putting together his team for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, the first man he wanted on board, outside of the cast obviously, was Harve Bennett. So he contacted Harve. Harve said, I'll meet you, but you come to me. And they both described it afterwards good-naturedly. It was a power play. It was, I'll talk to you, but you're going to come to me. I'm not coming to you. And so they sat down and he outlined his issues that had gone on the voyage home and how he felt. And they were able to, by the end of that meeting, come to an agreement that no, he would come back. He would work on the final frontier. And what's more, while Shatner wrote the idea for what would become the final frontier, Harve Bennett and the writer they subsequently hired, David Lochary, all three of them have writing credits on this film that itself is a story. Suffice to say for now, because also at some point, William Shatner is going to be like, will you just get them to buy me book, Sean? It is in the book. It's very, very interesting. So suffice it to say, after a long process, and let's not forget, there was a writer's strike which hit this film as well, which also was directly responsible for Shades of Grey existing as an episode. It was a grim time. It was a grim time. They got what was finally the shooting script. And yes, the first scene filmed was Harve Bennett's cameo as Fleet Admiral Bob. What a great name. Bob. Dressing a little informally, we see. You caught me on the way to the shower. I mean, I like it. They bounce so well off each other. Again, Shatner having a great relationship with someone he only ever talks to via the view screen. Take from that what you will. This scene also addresses the "you're the only ship in the quadrant" when we panned over the reuse of the Excelsior. So, I mean, I'm going to be like, right, first of all, down. Why didn't you just transfer your flag over to the Excelsior? Actually, I think that's an Admiral thing. So anyway, why didn't they just give them the Excelsior? I mean, from a logical standpoint, it's sitting there ready to go. You know, Scotty didn't do that bad of a job. Maybe this is supposed to be only a couple of weeks later. Right, okay. I've let my thoughts run through this one. Scotty obviously did such a good job sabotaging the Excelsior, it wasn't ready. Okay, right. But still, I mean, this thing is being held together with hope and prayer. As Kirk points out to Bob, like, the Enterprise is a disaster. He needs Kirk, and he needs that crew. So actually, for once, they directly address the, why are you calling us? Come on. There's any other fleet. No, we want Kirk. We want to make a statement. So do you know what? Up for addressing it. And then we get that great scene. It just pans up to McCoy. He goes, if you ask me, and you haven't, this is a terrible idea. Up the way D. Kelly delivers that. This leads then quickly to a sort of a summary of what the situation is. We run through who the different hostages is, and we get Sybok's demand video. And of course, we get the infamous scene of Spock's reaction. And Kirk says, you look like you just seen a ghost. Spock says, perhaps I have, Captain. Perhaps I have. Up for this scene on the observation deck, which, by the way, I think is a beautiful set. I really like the observation deck or the observation lounge in the Enterprise A. But this scene of the three of them discussing who Sybok is, you know, as McCoy says, a passionate Vulcan, how about that? It works. The idea behind Sybok came to Shatner when he was channel hopping, and he stumbled across Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They were TV evangelists, and as Shatner described them, he said he found something so grotesque about these people who were obviously exceedingly wealthy, and yet were, you know, soliciting donations in the name of God. God wanted to speak through them to their congregation. And how, as Shatner described it, their predatory behavior really, you know, it focused in on those who needed some strength, some love in their lives. That was the basis of Sybok. I do think there is an important distinction between Sybok and the, you know, Jim and Tammy Faye as Shatner saw them, and we'll get to that later on. But that sort of the grotesqueness of TV evangelism fueled the creation of Sybok. So here at least Sybok is already being fleshed out a little bit more. As Spock says, he was a brilliant prodigy, you know, he was one in a million. But once he started trying to convince others to follow him, he was banished from Vulcan. That tracks with everything we know about Vulcans. You know, if you mess with the status quo, you're more as likely going to be locked up or sent away than listened to. And that is something that we see throughout Star Trek. We get to Nimbus 3, and we have the problem of, well, the Enterprise barely holding together as it has. The transporter's not working, so we're going to go down in the shuttle. A few things happen in rapid succession. Shuttle goes down, we have the command crew of the Enterprise A goes down as well, effectively, and there's going to be the storm Paradise City. We get all that. One thing that they do introduce that I absolutely want to say is that Star Trek V, for any of its faults, gave us this. And this is my favorite phaser of them all. You see it more in The Undiscovered Country, which is why I'll play with it again in the next video, but yeah, I've always loved this one. This is the little version. That was the toy. I've actually held a cast of the main, like the actual one that was used in the film. Thank you very much, Sam Cockings, by the way. You know what you did. And the thing's huge. It's like there's a heft to it as well. So anyway, sorry. Yes, love that one. Star Trek V introduced that one. But an up for this scene, Captain Chekhov. And I loved it, because it's just fun. Walter Koenig's obviously having a ball playing the captain. He's chatting away with Sybok, keeping him distracted. A whopper of a down is the fan dance scene. Now listen, all right? I've nothing against Nichelle Nichols doing a fan dance. Actually, I think it's brilliant. And she had a ball doing this. And she recorded The Moon's a Window to Heaven as well. So when, on the film's release, she was in the theater and discovered she had been overdubbed by Margaret Sasaki Taylor, and of course the band Hiroshima who performed the song, she was incensed. And this down is in solidarity with Nichelle Nichols, because that is ridiculous. Think of how long these people have been working together. You tell someone, you know what I mean? So for me, once I discovered that has always ruined this scene. What was supposed to be kind of a silly, funny scene in which Uhura's like, all right, listen, I got this. I'm going to distract these people. And it was quite like fair play, Uhura scene. Spoiled. Totally spoiled for me by the behind the scenes of it all. I've another down, just for the plan overall. What was the plan? Think about it. Okay, we're going to get some horses. We're going to distract these people. We're going to ride into the city. Okay. And then we're going to save the hostages. Okay. How? Oh, right. Okay, so we're not coming up with a plan then. Right. They ride in, and within seconds, they're just going, Spock might as well have been holding that tricorder up to John's face as he runs through the gate. Like, how are you getting on? Yeah, I'm looking for the hostages. What was that about? I'll give an up, though, to Action Sulu. He falls off his horse, rolls over, walks up and shoots the light. All right, fair play, George Takei. I do want to give an up as well to, Lawrence Luckenbill Sybok's going, I didn't want this. What have you done? I didn't want bloodshed. He's very believable in the part. I'll give him that. Also, listen, of course I'm going to give an up to Spock giving a nerve pinch to a horse. Of course I am. Why wouldn't you? My sadly last scene involving the cat dancer. Listen, up to the fact of, someone obviously had James Brown on their mind. Watch the scene again. You'll know what I mean. But yeah, that's an up. So it all goes fairly pear-shaped when the hostages reveal that they're on Sybok's side, and Sybok reacts to the ruse, and he's laughing because he's like, who the hell are you? When Shatner, yes, of course. But when Kirk is like, how dare you do any of this? He's like, who's this fucker? And Sybok is like, Spock, it's me, it's Sybok. And Spock's like, cool story. Anyway, you're under arrest. I really like all of this. This is an up from me. The interplay between the characters works. And the reaction to the ruse, that all works for me. Up in space, the Klingons have arrived, which means the shields go up on the Enterprise A. I really like that as well. The zoop, 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 for the shields going up. It feels like it's stronger or something than the of the Wrath of Khan. Kirk gets in that shuttle pretty quickly, doesn't he? Can we just address the fact of, we've seen other hostage situations where Captain et al. Has been like, yeah, okay, cool, we're on the planet now. No, you're not taking the shuttle, you're not taking the ship, that's not happening. And, you know, the next thing we see, they're all in the shuttle flying up to the ship again. It's like, right, okay. And I know there's a little bit of like, you know, I don't want to hurt anyone and all that, but Kirk, I'm not sure how that would look in the court-martial. But it does give us the scene where, you know, we have to go emergency landing plan B. B as in barricade. It cannot be serious. Up for how fun the scene is, right? You know, Sulu, actually, it's my first time. You know, that works for me. Let me do something. All of that. Yep, fine. Down. The speed at which that shuttle hits that part of the Enterprise A, that's ending up in the back of the deflector dish. I mean, there's editing and there's come on now, will ya? Because that, you know, suddenly we go in, you know, it looks like full impulse, and, you know, it pulls off the I suppose the nacelles. They snap off, it's still going. We can see, as, you know, we can see that shuttle bay. As the doors open, there's another shuttle in there. I don't know, it looks like maybe 2 times, maybe 2.5 times the length of a shuttle. Yeah, that's some net, I can tell you. Once the shuttle is aboard, you know, the Klingon bird of prey, which has just decloaked and it was targeting the shuttle because Kirk's on board. That's Kla's big thing. He wants to fight Kirk. It really doesn't matter. And then the bird of prey tries to fire at the Enterprise A, which then warps away. It is a down. That is, without question, the ugliest shot of the film. So much so that for the first time in these retro ups and downs, my Trellium down goes to that shot. I'm sorry, that's unforgivable. Here, just to use this shuttle again. There. That looks better. I know I'm being very harsh, but there was a fairly high quality going into this film. That one was ugly. Right, we're at warp. If you want to call it warp. Anyway, we're moving. And then you get that bit of a punch up between Kirk and Sybok. And yeah, I like that they don't mess around. Sybok is far stronger than Kirk, as a Vulcan would be. You get Spock points the gun at Sybok's chest, doesn't fire. Kirk is not very pleased. They're put in a cell. Uhura and Sulu are put to the side for a moment. Come back to them just in a moment. But they're put in the cell, and then we get who is Sybok. This is an up. Because I like how they landed on this. In the scripting process, they had to figure out why Spock wouldn't kill Sybok. You know, the original idea was that Spock and McCoy would betray Kirk with the rest of the crew, and that Kirk would effectively be a lone wolf. And I'm going to say, thankfully, Leonard Nimoy and DeForest Kelley would not budge on that wouldn't happen. They would not do this. They would not in any way betray Kirk, not after everything they'd been through together. Nimoy, in particular, raised the point of, after Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock to then turn around and betray Kirk you're not writing the same character. And Shatner said, I was frustrated, but he couldn't 100% disagree with their logic. As he described it, if somebody else had written Kirk betraying them, he also would have, in his words, raised the roof. So we get the problem of, well, how do you then create a character that Spock won't kill and that he has a connection to without having a betrayal? And so they landed on their brothers. And also they then landed on, he's Sarek's son, not Amanda's. Problem solved. You know, we know so little about Sarek that introducing a half-brother doesn't really upset the status quo very much. We also get the first canonical appearance of a toilet in Star Trek, and I feel that's something that should be highlighted. A quick down for all of Nimoy and DeForest Kelley putting their foot down on Kirk, Spock and McCoy are not going to have this, full falling out. The rest of the crew, sans Scotty, can't betray him fast enough. Uhura and Sulu haven't left the shuttle bay by the time they're on Sybok's side. Chekhov then, he's still sitting in the captain's chair. Scotty, in fairness, is having none of it. It's all a little unclear. Is there mind control going on? If that is the case, is Sybok aware of the fact there's mind control going on? Because it calls into question his motives and his methods. If he is knowingly using some sort of mind control, then he's the baddie all the way through. If he is unknowingly using mind control all the way through, that is far more understandable. If not forgivable, it's far more understandable that he believes that they are being swayed to his way of thinking by the give me your pain. And if it's not mind control at all, that then makes the actions of Uhura, Sulu, and Chekhov that little bit more, and of course the hostages, that little bit more suspect. I mean, were they just waiting for a reason? It's just a little bit unclear. I think, for me personally, my headcanon, it's down the middle, is that there is a little bit of mind control going on, but Sybok's not aware of it. That is where it sits in my head. But I couldn't 100% stand over that and say that's what's happening. The reveal of Sybok's plan to travel past the Great Barrier and visit Shakari, yeah, that worked for me. I mean, it's as nonsense as anything else is, so yeah. We'll address the Great Barrier, of course, but the way he sells it really, really works. Down for me, not just the name Shakari, but knowing that it was there because they wanted Sean Connery. Okay, you didn't get him. Come up with a better name. That would be how I would settle on that one. I know for a fact Chris is going to disagree with me on that one because I know how much he likes Shakari. So you never know. Somebody else completely could be presenting the undiscovered country ups and downs. But that's how I feel. All right. Okay. Cool. Let's address getting to the center of the galaxy by tea time. That's a down. Novelizations and other media have tried to explain this away over the years, that somehow Sybok was able to tinker with the engines of the Enterprise A to get them to the center of the galaxy in, 25 minutes, and that somehow the Klingons were monitoring in such a way that they were able to copy those things. I mean, come on. If that's the case, would that not have been sent out throughout both fleets? Therefore, Voyager could have been home in a week. You know what I mean? This is dumb. It's not the first time, in fairness, that the original series era mucked about with time like that. Where no man has gone before, they fly to the edge of the galaxy. When we eventually, you never know, when we get to the ups and downs of that episode, I'll be downing that as well, because galaxy's a big place. And none of that makes sense. And it just makes the film feel that bit sillier as well. Because again, if you can get to the center of the galaxy that easily, why don't we nip to Vidra's planet? You know what I mean? We know that that's on the other side of the galaxy. It introduces too big of a technological leap to just hand wave away. Up! Bit of Morse code, remember that? Stand back, stand back! What are ye waiting for? Have you never seen a jailbreak before? There's just moments in this film that are hilarious. They work for me. I spoke about the comedy, right? People go back and forth over Scotty bumping his head. I like it. I know it's totally out of character for him, but if Sybok's controlling everyone's minds, maybe this is what, helps Scotty completely free himself, although he did just do the jailbreak as well. I'm trying to make sense of it, folks. I'm really trying to make sense of it. Anyway, he bumps his head. I always laugh. It's an up from me. Then we get the turbo shaft, or as Shatner called it, the House of Pain, because they all had to be harnessed in for that, the levitating boots shoot all the way up. If this is your favorite scene in the film, 100%, that's great. I'm glad you enjoy it. For me, it's a down. How many decks does this ship have? And why is the number going up the higher they go? Once you discover that was Shatner, this was addressed. He was told the numbers will go down, and also there's like 13 decks in the Enterprise A, or it's not that, but it's a low number of decks on the Enterprise A. Where are you getting your deck 72 from? And Shatner overruled that and said, no, it adds to the dramatic tension and everything. Right. This scene is what we look at when, if you shoot all the way forward to Discovery's 3rd season, and everyone, including ourselves, is giving out about the fact that the interior of Discovery is the size of a TARDIS with those turbo shafts are the size of a continent, well, there's precedent in Star Trek for that. Thanks, Shatner. Whopper of a down. I just want to give a shout out to Andy for a second, who said, what we should do is add all of the number of decks to the ups and downs. But when a single tear ran down Tom's cheek when I suggested that, we decided we're probably not going to do that. But Andy, we liked your idea. I have to say, I am giving an up to McCoy going, I'll wait for the next one. They send a message off to Starfleet, and it is received by the Klingons. Sybok then comes in and says, I trust your message was received, which is a reveal that, okay, Sybok obviously let that message go out because, you know, the crew work for him now, so anyone could have stopped it if they wanted to. We get a quick up. Uhura is there trying to make sure that Scotty's okay. Now, again, like I said, I'm not crazy about the romantic way or frankly sexual way that this is framed, but I do like the empathy here. You know, Scotty's able to go like, in my current condition, I don't think I could handle this and I don't think you could either. That worked for me. Now we get the big give me your pain scene. So in the beginning of this, I will just say that if this doesn't help the argument that there's mind control going on, because Spock and McCoy are both able to say, we're sticking with Jim. So, but this scene for so many reasons is fantastic. But DeForest Kelley in this scene, you know, McCoy, Leonard, son of David, who sees his dad suffering and in pain. DeForest Kelley has never been better. So, as heavy and as upsetting as the scene is, my dilithium up for Star Trek V: The Final Frontier is the two McCoys here in this scene. It's powerful, it's upsetting, it is crushing with the revelation that had McCoy let his dad suffer for another week, a cure then became available. Like, it's just everything about this. You know why he carries this pain with him. It's incredible and such a revelation for the character as well. Then you get the scene, Spock, from the moment of Spock's birth, Sarek classed him as so human. We also, I guess, get an Amanda Grayson cameo. Yeah, okay. And Spock carrying that weight with him. But this then leads to Spock revealing to Sybok that just because Sybok can see the moment of pain in people's lives doesn't mean he knows them. As Spock says, I am no longer that outcast boy. I have grown up. I know myself. And Spock and McCoy stick with Kirk. Now, Kirk refuses to do a share me your pain reveal. And yes, that works for Kirk as a character, I think. You know, I need my pain. Is it a little bit over the top? Is anything Shatner related? So, actually, saying that, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the reputation is unearned. There is moments of Shatnerisms, but overall, that's been massively exaggerated over the years. Up for Spock's give me your pain moment. Up for Spock saying, Sybok, you are my brother, but you do not know me. And up, finally, we get the catalyst for Sybok's actions. He reveals here that he knows they'll get through the Great Barrier because God sent him a vision. It's at this point in the film where we reveal that. And Kirk goes, you are mad. Am I? I'm telling you, the acting in this film is not the film's issue. This absolutely works. This final section of the film is where I think a lot of the issues start to become most noticeable. So, for example, down the look of the Great Barrier, both from outside and in it, looks cheap. They were obviously trying to go for something with V'ger. They did not achieve it. I will say, despite Jerry Goldsmith's best efforts here, this score, gorgeous. I do like the inscription on the steering wheel in the observation lounge. to boldly go where no man has gone before. Well, isn't that there from the earliest days of Star Trek? And here we are about to meet God. Let's talk about God, shall we? Really quickly. Down to the depiction of God in this film and how everything is very Western. So this is something that even at the time they realized was going to be an issue. Shatner, when he originally pitched the idea to the head of Paramount, he was worried that, it was going to get pushback because it is, religion obviously is a very touchy subject. Because you don't want to offend, but you also want to tell a real story, and where do those two things bump heads with each other? And so everyone kind of settled on an idea that didn't really satisfy anyone. The depiction of Sha'Carri as well. Oh my goodness, do the budget cuts hit here? This idea of Sha'Carri, Vortifor, QE2, Eden, sure, all very Western, but okay. Sybok handing back control of the Enterprise to Kirk with no pushback, thinking, I've proved myself. The end of this, do you know what this reminds you of? The end of this film is a bit like the end of the episode Threshold. It could have been better, and it just falls apart. I think in this case, though, it is the construction of the film, because there's still great little bits in it as well. For example, taking up God's a busy man. Well, we got, shuttle number 3, Copernicus, nice to see that as well. We get Jerry Goldsmith going, you're gonna remember this one. It's none of that is an issue. We put a pink filter on the camera, there, we're down on Sha'Carri, that's all great. The one thing that is both funny to me, but also makes perfect sense, is the fact that they stop and Sybok has time for a haircut. It's never addressed, but also, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You're gonna meet God, of course you're gonna look your best, aren't you? So it's one of those funny things that no one ever addresses. And then when they get down to the planet, there's one thing, and I don't know how deliberate this was, but I really like it. It's when Sybok, having seemingly discovered nothing, goes, "We have traveled far," and the echo bounces that back to him. Knowing what we're about to discover with God, that feels like he's being mocked. And I thought that was such a good decision. Whether or not that's exactly what the intention was, that's an up to me. I will say though, down, you've been there for literally 40 seconds. Oh well, we found nothing, back we go. Give him a chance. And then the pillars rise. And I think maybe the easy thing to do is just down for this rushed ending and how it's constructed. I can sit here and add about another 25 downs to the counter, but I think just the easiest thing to do is just the ending is a down. The pillars rise, they're standing there, we get the sparkles, a pillar of light rises, and I am gonna give an up to George Murdoch, okay? I think, he is suitably intimidating as God. You would recognize him again, he comes back in The Next Generation as Admiral Hansen. I think he does his best with it. This is another one of the issues that I think Shatner had an issue with this as well, is that it's a very, okay, bearded man from the clouds. It's that depiction of God, which was in all of the galaxy. You know what I mean? So I know Shatner had an issue with that as well. He was effectively overruled. We get, Sybok interacting with this being, and it's all the music is glorious, and he goes, this starship, could it carry my essence beyond the barrier? It could, yes. And then, excuse me, what does God need with a starship? Yes, the immediately memeable quote that has everyone knows it. What does God need with a starship? Up, completely up. And we get that great, the great interchange. I seek proof. Jim, you don't ask the Almighty for his ID. Taken up because if there was, I know stereotypes here, okay? I know I'm looking at stereotypes, but if there was a character of the ones there, not including Sybok, who perhaps would be a believer, it would be McCoy. I feel like McCoy would be the one who would have a deep-seated belief in God. And so, yeah, I can see him going like, Jim, shut up. What? Shut up. Jim, you know? But God ruins everything by shooting those eye lasers at Kirk. You know, why is God angry? And then Spock goes, you did not answer his question. What does God need with a starship? Up. I can imagine convincing a logical Vulcan being the hardest job in the world when it comes to belief. And then, do you doubt me? I doubt any God that would inflict pain for their own amusement. Up. It's very evident then to everyone that Sybok's made a whoopsie. Sybok, most of all, has realized, oh, I think I've done a bad thing here. So his retribution, it's swift. His redemption, I think is a better word. It's swift, but I mean, the man pays with his life. I love that scene of, obviously I have opposing hands, so we're this with Spock. And your pain, give it to me. And that mirror image of himself bounced back at him. So the original idea for this ending, it was much, much bigger. You know, it was going to be angels and demons, the Sybok and the crew, they would go down through into the underworld through the river Styx. And Harve Bennett, again, in an interview, years past, he spoke quite frankly, and it was an interview with Shatner, and he said, listen, your ambitions were great, but you weren't thinking like a filmmaker. You weren't thinking like somebody who had a budget you had to work with. You were thinking of, probably work great in a novel, but trying to achieve that on film with the budget they were being allocated just wasn't doable. And so that's when the budget cuts started happening, and they started to lose little bits and lose little bits more. There was a strict runtime issue as well that, Shatner wanted a little bit over 2 hours. The studio were like, no, bring it down. Bring it down. And of course, then we get to the idea of something that I know some of you have been waiting for this. Let's talk about the Rockman. Okay, so originally there were going to be these beings that were made of rocks that would become something that, they had to fight. The total original cost of those costumes was going to run at something like $300,000. And it was lovely and straightforward. Absolutely not. That's not happening. So Shatner had to give ground. He's like, right, okay, we can't do 6. Maybe we can do 3. Absolutely not. That's not happening. Can we do 1? Right, we'll give you 1. You can do 1 of these Rockmen. Grand. Okay, cool. So we're going to go. Tom Morga's going to be in the suit. That's great. Okay. So they build this Rockman, right? And the Rockman looks okay. As Shatner said, it's like when it was working, it was breathing fire, it was smoking, it was moving, and it looked scary. So he's like breathing, just relief. Great, cool. We have something tangible to fight at the end of this film, because of course God, Pillar of Light, is going to be done with CGI or VFX. And so day 1, when they're testing the suit, breathing fire. Great, they get, the smoke comes out by a bunch of people, as Shatner says, risking lung cancer by sucking down cigarettes and blowing the smoke into a tube that then comes out of this being's mouth. Brilliant, looks great. Day 2. Doesn't breathe fire anymore. It's not moving as good anymore. And frankly, it doesn't look great. One of those in the cold hard light of day things. Takes a while, but they managed to get the smoke tubes working again. But they can, Shatner described it as, you could see as the time went on, the reality became more and more horrible. I'm like, that's not gonna work, but we're gonna film it, we're gonna do what we can, and they filmed it and they got the footage and the pictures are available, probably over my shoulder. It looked pants. It did not look good at all. It absolutely flopped as an idea. They saw it when they went back and looked over the dailies again. So the Rockman, which has become one of the most infamous parts that was never in The Final Frontier as it was released. I mean, it's still getting an up from me. Are you kidding me? The Rockman's getting an up. But oh my goodness, it was that, if you like, is the symbol of, we had an idea for Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, and you have a film called Star Trek V: The Final Frontier, and these two things are not the same thing. Now, I'm sorry to say that the effects of this film's woes do not end just there, because down, why is the Enterprise firing a V'ger probe from the motion picture? Yes, for some inexplicable reason, they changed the look of the photon torpedoes in this movie as well, and it doesn't look great. Also, down, what was the plan here, Kirk? You're standing directly beside a photon torpedo's detonation. I want to remind you of a scene from Q-Who. So season 2, Next Generation. And the Enterprise D is so close to a Borg cube that Data surmises a photon detonation would likely destroy the Enterprise D. They should make the Enterprise D out of what they made Jim Kirk out of, because apparently he can just hop out of the way. Sadly, however, this is the end of Sybok, who presumably is killed by the photon detonation that does absolutely sweet FA for anything else. I'd knock some of those styrofoam rocks over, I guess. Kirk, Spock and McCoy run back to the shuttle and they realise, oh, God's a bit angry. So Kirk has Scotty beam up McCoy and Spock. He's managed to get the transporter working that much, and then the bird of prey comes out and fires another torpedo, and effectively we get a do-over of Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. Thankfully not with a self-destruct, but the Enterprise is as weak as anything. And one torpedo blast, it's all a bit silly, it's a down, it's obviously just for dramatic tension. This does of course lead to Spock turning around to Cord and saying, by the way, you're in this film, so, you need to do something here. Of course, says, I am just a foolish old man. Damn you, sir. You will try. Taken up from me. And this leads to the now iconic scene of, Shatner has spoken about how there was supposed to be something else Shatner was running away from. Nope, it was just a reuse of George Murdoch's face. Nothing against George Murdoch's face, but yeah, doesn't look great. And the Klingon bird of prey rises from over that ridge and fires its disruptors at it. I am giving an up to the iconic now image of Kirk saying, it's me you want, you Klingon bastards. What's he gonna do? Fist fight a bird of prey? It's still fun to look at, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's stupid, which is why it's a down, but still fun to look at. And proving how Captain Claw was an absolute nothing of a villain. Kirk is marched into the bridge of the bird of prey, Cord is there, and he's like, my junior officer has something he'd like to say to you. I apologize. Okay. Down. And the chair spins around and Spock was the gunner of the bird of prey. Look, it's just silly. It's an up. I will say, Shatner's plays this as if he hasn't seen Spock in forever, and it's like, Spock. It's like, oh my God, it's so nice to see you, apart from literally 3 minutes ago when I saw you. But it's still played as a fun scene. And we get the whole, please, Captain, not in front of the Klingons. But, again, really, really nice thing. I thought I was going to die. Impossible. You were never alone. Aww, Spock, taken up. And it all wraps up fairly nicely. One nice exterior shot I will give credit to is the Enterprise A and the bird of prey flying side by side. I'm gonna give it an up. You have to give them a break. And we get that scene where Chekhov and Sulu are following Vixus and they turn around when they see Claw. And, Claw's like, oh, success and everything. Grand, yeah, everyone's being very forgiving. And, we get that whole ending, I find myself thinking of Sybok. And we get that scene that suggests it's a continuity error, but actually I don't think it is. Spock says, I have lost a brother. Kirk says, I lost a brother once. I was lucky I got him back. And I remember a lot of people going, Sam obviously didn't mean very much to you. A statement that's maybe aged even worse since the inclusion of Dan Jeanot's Sam Kirk in Strange New Worlds. But no, he said a brother, not my brother. Suggesting, maybe a little bit of mental legerdemain going on here, but suggesting there's more than one. And obviously he's referencing Wrath of Khan. So for me, I actually like this scene, and what if he really is still out there? Well, maybe life is but a dream. We go back down to Yosemite. Spock pulls out the Vulcan lute, lyre, the Vulcan harp. Pick which one you like, and plays Row, Row, Row Your Boat, and Jerry Goldsmith plays it out. Take an up for that last scene. Now, would you join me at temporal observations? I've gone through an awful lot of the behind the scenes as we've gone through this video, but so some of the things that have, we've seen come up with other things. Let's look at Sybok, and I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, Sarek had another child? Surely that would never happen again in Star Trek. There's a show you should watch, it's called Star Trek Discovery. Actually, yeah, it's quite good. Yeah, it takes a little while to find its feet, but it's not good. Look, there are people who will never be okay with the idea of Michael Burnham. There are people who never cared that Michael was connected to Spock. I don't know, I'm fine with it, because Sybok was our precedent that, yes, here Sarek literally has another blood child, but that Spock had a family member. In this film, he says, I was not predisposed to discuss matters of a personal nature. And at this point, they're working together 20 odd years. So this idea works for me. And of course, Sybok, well, the back of him would appear directly in Strange New Worlds in the episode The Serene Squall. So in this film, more clearly than a lot of other times James Doohan appeared, you can see that he's missing a finger on his right hand. That's because it was shot off when he was in war. And so he always took great pains to hide that. But it seems to be less so here. There's no close-up on his hand, but he's not kind of obscuring it as much as possible. So that suggests that somewhere between the voyage home and the final frontier, Scotty lost a finger. The look of the ship will of course be very familiar to anyone who's seen The Next Generation, because the corridors are just the corridors of the Enterprise D. Now the bridge was a new set constructed by Herman Zimmerman, and it's funny, I see people kind of 50-50ing on whether they like this set or not. I quite like it. I do think that the comm and the nav panel, like there's a shot of it or something where you can just see the top of Sulu's head. It's up very high. I'd lower it down a little bit, which they do for the Undiscovered Country. I quite like this. It's very, this is our period of exploration version of the bridge. I know Kirk does say, I miss my old chair. I don't. I never liked the chair. I never ever did. With the little leg guards that go over it. No, give me one with the big armrests any day. I mentioned this earlier on, but this film was hit by the Writers Guild of America strike in 1988. Well, so was Star Trek The Next Generation Season 2, which were filming concurrently. You might have seen the images of an aged up McCoy with a TNG comm badge while wearing his Monster Maroon. Things like that, because it was all happening at the same time. I think TNG Season 2 came out of the writer's strike a little bit better. Yes, shades of grey exist, I know, but I think with all of the changes and everything that went on through the Final Frontier script, I think this one came off the worse. The whole idea of the film, so there's been a lot of back and forth and discussion about what did Gene Roddenberry think of Shatner's script. And Richard Arnold, who was working with Roddenberry at the time of the making of this film, was a Star Trek archivist, and he described Roddenberry's reaction as being very hurt, because from his point of view, it was his idea. There was the earlier idea of, in the God thing and in thy image, that eventually molded to become Star Trek the Motion Picture, that he was told, you're not telling a story about God. You're not, Paramount flat out refused. It's not happening, you're not doing it, no. And then here comes Shatner with a script explicitly featuring a character called God. So Roddenberry felt very offended by this. Shatner, sure, but also his treatment by Paramount. He's still executive consultant on this film, which is sadly a bit of a meaningless title. He gets money, but you don't have to follow any of his script directions. Shatner wrote in his book that by the time they got to the final script for the film, Roddenberry approved it. Then this seems to be at odds with the fact that Roddenberry afterwards seems to have deemed Star Trek V apocryphal. So, treat it with canon whether you want to, whether you don't. Obviously, we discuss Star Trek canon ad nauseum here on the channel and as a fandom in general. And here you have people involved in making the show contradicting each other in terms of canon as well. Richard Arnold suggested that Gene's personal assistant and secretary Susan Sackett was kind of not helping matters by sort of, flaming, Bill Shatner's this and Bill Shatner's that, and he's trying to screw you over and everything. And there was the idea of legal proceedings. I mean, this got serious because it looked as though, to Roddenberry, Shatner had ripped off his idea for the God thing for Star Trek V. Now, it never got as far as actually going to court over it, but there was bad blood behind the scenes now on The Final Frontier. The Final Frontier, funny, I mentioned canon, and it's funny how little The Final Frontier comes up again. Now, we have addressed the Sybok in the room, but the Next Generation was a bit cute with it, right? Evolution, which is the premiere episode of the 3rd season of The Next Generation, data says that there has not been a ship-wide starship malfunction or a system shutdown in 79 years. And there's a little bit of debate over what year exactly The Final Frontier takes part in, but that adds up. Like, that Evolution would be 79 years after The Final Frontier. So that's one thing. And a deleted scene from the Next Generation's episode Family would have referenced Nimbus III. The film won several awards in 1990, if you want to call it winning. They won the Razzie for Worst Film, Worst Director, and Worst Actor. Those latter two both going to William Shatner. There is a question as to whether or not this film was going to be theatrically released, depending on where you were in the world, because it was perceived to have done so poorly in the US. This film, there was also a bit of it, there's a kind of Final Frontier had a lower budget and it looked worse. Well, no, it didn't, actually. It had a higher budget than The Voyage Home. It just wasn't spent as well. For many of the reasons that I've already outlined earlier on. There was delays, there was issues, there was rockmen that never were, and there was effects houses that by the time the effects were delivered, there just was no time to fix them. There's so many issues, but actually the budget wasn't really the issue with this film. It didn't do fantastically at the box office. I don't think anybody will be shocked to learn, but it did enough that Paramount did greenlight a new final film for the original series, which of course we will look at next. Fun fact about the Rockman, by the way, that idea would turn up in another Star Trek film, Galaxy Quest. Kirk is sure that he will die alone. Is that a statement that will age well? Keep watching these retro ups and downs and you'll see. Kirk, of course, references his brother. We know that George Samuel Kirk died in the episode Operation Annihilate. Those flying six that would sit on your back, the flying parasites, and killed him. It's quite horrible, really. But maybe Strange New Worlds can do something to change that, because I really like Dan Jeannotte as Sam Kirk. I really do. I've already mentioned the fact that this was the return of Jerry Goldsmith. It was a bit of a stop and start because he then didn't come back for the Undiscovered Country because of how poorly The Final Frontier did at the box office. And in fact, it was released direct to video in a lot of properties because of that. So it did have a theatrical release. So this is a theatrical Star Trek film. But yeah, depending on where you were in the world, it was like, oh, it's straight to video. Right so. Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, released in October of 1989, and we all know what the reviews were like. There is a very sweet story before I leave you off. The morning that after it released, Shatner was woken up by a phone call from Leonard Nimoy, who presented the first review that he had read, which was glowing. That first review, it was a love letter. So Shatner recalled that that was an amazing experience, that after all of the pain and all of the strife, there was this beautiful shared moment between himself and Leonard Nimoy before the rest of the reviews came in. Love it or hate it, The Final Frontier is infamous in Star Trek. It's silly, it's as camp as anything, It suffers from the effects. As I say, check out BL Creative. And it has so much going for it. It's got Lawrence Luckenbill as Sybok. It's got Jerry Goldsmith back as, you know, one of the most important composers in Star Trek. And Shatner, for all of the issues, I will say, in fairness to the man, he certainly tried, and he has not been afraid to own up to the mistakes. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching along. I hope you enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this deep dive into The Final Frontier. Is it one of my favorite Star Trek films? No, it is not. Is it one of the most interesting? Yeah, it is. We will see you for The Undiscovered Country, which is coming next. In the meantime, you look after yourself. Give me your pain and live long and prosper. Thanks very much.